Welcome, everyone, for another episode of Enough to Keep Going. This is episode 14. Last week was episode 13, and somewhere in between there is 13.1. Gentlemen, this past Sunday, I needed enough to keep going because I ran a half marathon. I ran 13.1 miles right in between our episode 13 and 14, timing it out just for you guys. So, joining me tonight, not running a marathon or hobbling around for 3 days afterward, is Osiris Prime. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Yes, I will never run a marathon in my life. It's not gonna happen.
Ah,
Nope.
it's all about training, all about
Oh, I know.
practice. It's just like level grinding. It's just about repetition and slowly building up your power level time after time.
I love food too much. I can't give that up.
Aha. So, and also joining us tonight is Iglesias Stamos. I'm going to start using your name on your tag there, sir. So, how are you tonight?
It's a Killer Instinct character now. That's awesome.
I don't know what's going on this podcast, and I elect now to disavow myself of any knowledge of these proceedings.
Oh, well, then when I go into full geek mode talking about Destiny 2, you have already, claim some plausible deniability here. So take off your headset but for the rest of you who are out there listening or picking this up and listening tonight, we are going to talk about Destiny 2. Zeus, Iglesias, and I have both been playing some Destiny 2, and maybe we even might talk Prime into giving it another consideration, or maybe we'll just sell him on the fact that he was fine to pass on it. But before we do that, we've got some else to talk about because this is the fall, right? We are headlong into release schedules, and over the past couple of weeks here on Enough to Keep Going, we've been talking about not only the fall games, but we've been talking about our backlogs. We've been talking about the difference between being a day one gamer or waiting for that discount. We've been talking about how we manage and sparse out both our game time, but also our gaming dollars. And so tonight we're going to continue that conversation by talking about kind of the reality of the backlog in amidst the content rush of the holiday season. So as we head into October here and things begin to clip out at a faster pace, right? This coming week, we've got some Forza, we've got Cuphead, we've got all kinds of series of sports games, we've got Project Cars 2 that came out this week, and then we head into October and we're going to get some more action games. We've got plenty of third-person games coming up, along with everything else that Nintendo continues to provide updates or really long Nintendo Directs about, as you guys have talked about as well. So, but really, we're going to spend the first little bit here talking about the realities of chasing that day one or dealing with our backlog. How are there games coming up this fall? Are there things that have caused us to take a second look at our backlog? Gentlemen, this week I went back to my backlog, the thing that I so diligently picked away at in the springtime and haven't touched since May, to see what else I could consider going back to. There are some games, there are new updates, there's new patches, there's expansions. Dishonored 2 expansion just came out. Are there announcements and games coming out this fall that give you a reason to return to some of those games that are sitting on your backlog? So, Prime, I know that you have not been playing Destiny 2, and you've also been a pretty diligent backlog player. So, are there things coming out this fall that have caused you to give you a second look at some of the things in your backlog?
Not really at this time right now. I did when that Battlefront the season pass went free. I had actually already had it because I bought the Ultimate Edition or whatever they call it back on one of the sales, I think last year at one point. So I thought about jumping back into that, but I didn't because I've just been busy, so I haven't had a lot of game time this past week. But I had other things that I wanted to play. Switch, which one of the ones that I'm going to talk about later is Project Octopath Traveler, which is just the demo.
Yep.
So that dropped, and I thought that looked really cool. So I wanted to kind of go back and try that, or I shouldn't say go and try that. So, and I just had other things I wanted to go through, which I'll talk about later. So, unfortunately, right now, nothing. Zeus, what about you?
Can you guys still hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So I guess the latest thing that I jumped into that was an external incentive, an external driver, was what Pride mentioned, the Star Wars DLC. So unfortunately, my sad tale is that I bought that game in 2015 on one of those years that we mentioned, I think on last week's show, where I said, lots of times I will claim that I'm not going to play something, but in that dead time between Christmas and New Year's, when I'm kind of sitting around and have lots of free time, that's sometimes when I go and grab like 2 or 3 games at once that have been on the radar, and a lot of times they're the games that I claimed I wasn't going to buy. So I bought it. Was a little dissatisfied with the depth of content that was available, and really, I guess I really bent myself out of shape because I was really cranky that I couldn't use a joystick for the X-wing battles, and having to use a gamepad for those, and kind of jankify like the inverted y-axis. It was just a big turnoff. And at the time there were only like 4 single player missions. But when I saw that the DLC went free, it was a little bit analogous to our Destiny discussion, right? Where I was like, I jumped back into Destiny when it was a more complete game, and that's the feeling I've gotten out of Star Wars Battlefront, that it's a more complete game with all the DLC available, and there's enough to keep me occupied to warrant jumping into the game. So I jumped into that when the DLC went free. I think last week, like maybe right before one of our shows last week.
Yeah, I have had a chance to jump back into Battlefront back in the winter time of early 2017. I jumped in, right? And I had played it back with the EA Access preview, and by hour 7 of my 10 free hours, I was done and finished. But being able to jump back in and do the Death Star missions and fly above the Death Star, or play on the Rogue One planet, from the climactic battle there, it added a lot more to it in terms of at least variety that was not in the original game. Another game that's sitting on my backlog, or that I'm both looking at from when I reviewed my list, but also something that's a new game this fall, is Uncharted Lost Legacy. So I had picked up the Uncharted 4 season pass on sale for $24 at one point in time, and didn't really think a whole lot of it, because it was supposed to come with DLC at some point. And then that's what eventually came into Lost Legacy. And so as a season pass holder, I ended up getting Lost Legacy as part of that bundle. So, so that has caused me to kind of, as I've been excited about looking at Lost Legacy and reading the reviews from last month, it also gave me a kind of hesitation of, do I just jump into this 10-hour game, or do I kind of dive back into hour 3 of the 18-hour Uncharted 4 game that I have not finished yet? So there are definitely some games and times there where something that's coming out, or the backlog pieces, provide us an incentive to come back in. Zeus, go ahead.
So an interesting note on that, because I wound up buying that last week. Interesting thing, I think I failed to mention it on last week's news show, but and I think it's still going on. So on the PlayStation Network now, they have certain games. I think there's like about 14 games that are newer-ish titles. That if you buy those, you get a 20% discount credit. It doesn't get applied to your account until something like November 22nd, and I don't know what the driver behind that is, but so at any rate, I bought Destiny 2 and Uncharted Lost Legacy last week for, I guess, $99 total, and like I said, I'll at some point in late November, I'll get a 20% discount redemption code or whatever for PSN store credit. So if you haven't taken advantage of that, listeners, viewers, you may want to go check that out. An interesting thing is, I believe it's the case that I think there's a reverse discount, meaning so you bought Uncharted 4 and got Lost Legacy for free. After I bought Lost Legacy, Uncharted 4 now shows up in my library as as available for only $40. So I think if you buy Lost Legacy, I think they discount that amount from a purchase of the Uncharted 4 full game if you choose to buy that as well.
Huh. Well, that's interesting. No, that I had not. I mean, because the Lost Legacy was part of the DLC. It came with the season pass.
Right.
But that's interesting that they're kind of bundling it with a discount on Uncharted 4. You also ended up, I didn't get it because I had the season pass, but if you bought Lost Legacy, did you get also the Jack and Daxter remaster then as well? Because that was supposed to come with.
Did it show up as a separate game?
It would probably show up as a separate game, yeah.
Okay, so no, I didn't see that. Although I agree with you, that was the story as we understood it, that you were supposed to get that. But was that if you pre-ordered it?
That's a good question, right? Like if that was the incentive, if the
Right.
2003 PlayStation 2 game was the incentive for pre-ordering a 2017 game, that's a good question.
Right.
If my sarcasm is not enough there, I can tinge it again a little bit as well. So, but Zeus, on this topic, in terms of new releases giving us a reason to come back to games, one of the things I installed on Steam this past week was NBA 2K17. The basketball game, right? Because I have that on Steam, and with the release of it on consoles with a new version, I figured I should probably at least try out the one that I own. In a similar spot, Dishonored 2, the expansion came out. You've played a little bit of Dishonored. Do you have any interest in, is this nudging you to consider going back and picking up that campaign again?
It's definitely a nudge. I haven't acted upon that yet, but it's definitely one of those things where I feel very bad that I guess I have both. And this is part of the problem. We talk about Steam as a problem that I'm sure Valve has cut some science behind this, right? That you just feel, and now I feel like I have to stay off of the Steam app because you're just incentivized to buy things just because they're extremely inexpensive. But yeah, at some point I grabbed, Dishonored. It's weird that I've got Dishonored 2 somewhere. Maybe I have it on PlayStation 4 or Xbox, probably PS4. So I have both of the games now sitting in my backlog. I have played neither except maybe some of the opening sequences of the original Dishonored. But yeah, in terms of, the discussion we had last week about do you expend all your holiday cheddar, right, playing the new games that are coming out, or do you go halfsies and get some of the newer games, but then spend some time spelunking your backlog, which I think is definitely the hybrid model is kind of where I'm headed. But yeah, I'm definitely incentivized. It's a creeping thought, right? Every time I think about putting out cash for one of the new games that's coming out this holiday season, I'm reminded, you have Dishonored 2, and now there's relatively inexpensive DLC that's available if you would knock one of those two out at least.
Yeah, I think that's, that is certainly a thought that's run through my head, even thinking about Destiny 2, right? Like, is this enough of a different experience that I'm not going to get the same satisfaction or the same gameplay kind of feel from a game that I already own? I look at, the screenshots from Assassin's Creed Origins, and they're beautiful, but I also feel like I own a number of the past Assassin's Creed games. Is this actually going to feel different enough to give me a reason to dive in or to invest that money rather than waiting for a sale or something else? Prime, do you ever feel that tug here? So you've got, well, I should say, I'm gonna rephrase that question, Prime, because I know that you feel that tug, but you continue to buy when you feel that tug, right? You have purchased Lego Worlds on multiple systems. You've already said that Skyrim is going to be a multiple systems purchase. So in your case, when you're faced with even playing the same game on another system, what's that deciding factor? What makes you choose to keep coming back to that similar experience?
I think it's just like I'm kind of being basic here, but it's just the fun that I have with the game. So obviously, with Minecraft is another one, and Lego Worlds. You know, I always have fun when I'm playing those games, whether, you know, by myself, with my friends, or, you know, with my son, whatever, it doesn't matter. But, you know, I'm always having a good time, and I can do whatever I want, especially Minecraft or Lego Worlds. You can just, you know, do whatever, explore, or you can build a base if you want. You can, you know, do whatever, wait until it becomes night and wait for the enemies, excuse me, to come out. So that's one factor. And then with Skyrim, man, I even how to like phrase like how that's like, well, actually, Oblivion was the first game that kind of pulled me into RPGs. You know, and we had that discussion of what RPG is, but to me, that's an RPG. And Skyrim just refined it and, you know, made it better. And, you know, I did beat the main story in that, but I never did finish all the DLC. So this will kind of give me an opportunity to go back and do that at least, and that's kind of part of it.
So how many systems do you have Skyrim for? Because you have it on last generation, right? But then you also picked up the remastered last year when it came out. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I had it on 360, and then I got the remaster for the Xbox One, and then I'll buy for the Switch, which you know, they have some, you know, like Link stuff, and, you know, the shield and the sword and the outfit. But I mean, that's not a driving factor for me, at least. But it just the fun I had, once again, the fun I had in the game, and just, you know, now I can take it on the go. You know, I could take it on vacation if I want. I could take it, you know, I could play on at lunchtime, at work. And you know, it's the portability, and I know I've said it before. You know, I'm actually thinking of buying NBA 2K18 eventually. I'm not going to buy that right away. I know it's I think I can buy it on the eShop already if I wanted to, but I'm going to wait on that one. Same thing with the WWE. Rocket League is another one that's going to be coming out. So I'll definitely want to get that. That'll be, you know, perfect for when I'm on the go. I can just play a couple matches and I'm good. You know, so yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, no, I don't mean to judge, because this is an owner of Borderlands 2 in like 4 different consoles. So I think between the Vita version and PS3 and PS4 and PC, right? Part of it is that gameplay experience. Part of it is also the different, as you guys have talked about in the past as well, right? It's the communities that you can play with, right? So if I know that a friend or, you know, a group has a certain game on a platform, you know, Rocket League is certainly that potential there. You know, being able to play with other people that we know have that game and that platform, it gives us a reason to kind of go back and double dip on some of those experiences.
And cross-platform for Rocket League too.
So then there's not even a reason to double dip.
That's true, yeah.
Well, and Fortnite, if you choose to play it on weekends when devs make mistakes.
That's right. Oh. And it pops in there all of a sudden.
I love that story though, because it's such a, like, this is not as complicated as people may make it out to seem. It's very much a publisher platform decision versus technology.
So who was vindicated? This guy. It's TCP IP. That's the same regardless of what platform you're on. Like, shut up, Sony! So at the core of this question, right, is we all have paradigms, algorithms. Some of us are apparently geeky and nuking it out, as is the case with those of you who are maintaining spreadsheets, as we discovered, as we unearthed a couple of weeks ago.
I don't do that, by the way. Just to throw that out there. I'm not that nerdy.
So we all have paradigms and algorithms that we're going by to manage our backlogs. We all probably spent some amount of time where we failed to recognize that we were stockpiling a backlog. I know that was me for a few years. I was like, oh, wait, hold on a second. I have like 100-something games that I've never finished. And then we all probably individually struggled with acknowledging that we had a backlog, but still leaving it unmanaged. Like, it'll just happen. Somehow I'll just eventually there'll be enough rainy days and 3-day weekends, is my favorite cliche, that I'll just get through those eventually. But that doesn't happen, right? When you have a backlog of hundreds of games, they don't just play themselves, right? You have to deliberately have something that drives you to do that. DB, were you going to interject here?
No, I was just going to, as 3 parents on this podcast, right? Like, even a rainy day does not suddenly become a gaming day. So,
right. So what this question and this discussion is really around is how much external influence impacts that enclave, right? Whatever surface area you maintain and surround and use to encapsulate your backlog gameplay, how much of that gets driven by external influences? And the ones we thought of were dropping DLC, which can be new maps, new characters, whole new story, narrative-based content, new multiplayer modes. And I'm getting the feeling that from what we've discussed so far, it's not a lot of external influence, or if it is, it's this other option that we have in the write-up, which is, yeah, we get incentivized, but we just kind of note that it's coming out, and then we also stockpile that in our backlog with the rest of all the other new games that we're continuously buying that we'll never get. Not that we'll never get a chance to play, but that drive us to never being able to complete what's in our backlog. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds, well, before I even answer that part, I'm just going to say I've given up on the backlog. I'm going to go back and still play those games eventually. I'll go through them. But as far as like, hey, I'm going to set this amount, it's never going to happen. So I'll just go back at my leisure. But like you mentioned, and another thing I wanted to ask too is, so you mentioned DLC, bringing you back. But what if you see like your friends coming back to a certain game? Would you start jumping back into that game? Or because like I think I mentioned this a couple of shows ago, I tried to play Elite Dangerous as probably like a month or so ago, and I was by myself, and I did a few missions here and then. I was just like, this is kind of boring, just because I didn't have those guys back from CAG like I used to play with. So, and if those guys are still on there playing, or if they had jumped back on, I definitely probably would have jumped back into that game. So I don't know if that's a deciding factor for you guys either.
So I know a thing that's weaving into my plan and approach to Star Wars Battlefront, because I have a lot of games, and like you mentioned, like it's just not going to happen. I haven't fooled myself into believing I'm going to get through all of my backlog, but there are certain ones that I do want to play through. And for instance, is a Star Wars Battlefront. I feel bad that I bought that game and barely scratched the surface on it. One of the things that's going to drive me through that is there's a lot more single-player modes and maps now. And one of the key things is most of those, maybe all of them, are also playable as two-person co-op. So I definitely have an intention of hopefully connecting with some people who have that on PC, either before or even after Battlefront 2 comes out, and playing some of those missions in co-op. I'm actually more interested in doing that than I am in jumping into like 64-person multiplayer.
Yeah, and Battlefront's way, I was tempted today with an Amazon deal for PlayStation VR, right? That one of the things that it was part of the season pass on the PlayStation 4 for Battlefront was the VR experience. That's one of the things, like when I purchased it for $10, I thought, okay, well, at least at some point I may get this other experience out of it. I think there's another case here in terms of, having that network of friends. I got pulled back into Battlefield 1 over the past week or so because the premium accounts now have access to the new Russia maps and the new DLC that's coming out at the end of this month. And so World Voyager, a couple other people from old CAG days, and I have been playing on those maps with different classes and skills, and it's the first time that I really sunk time into it since probably back at the beginning of the summer. So I think it is, right? We've talked about that in a number of ways. You guys have waxed philosophical about the glory days of Xbox 360 in terms of the social environments there. And so that has always been a big factor. So if there is a community that you want to be engaged with that's either coming back to a game or moving on to a game, there's a lot of incentive there to go with that. Prime, is that something where, as you're looking at things, have you been keeping an eye on your friends list to see if there are those elite players out there, or is it something where you're kind of, you're not seeing it and you're ready to move on?
Yeah, I always check my my friend. I usually check my friends list like after I jump on and do a couple things, and then I'll jump into my friends list and see what everybody's playing, see if there's anything I want to jump into. So it is something I do look for, and there's something else I was going to say now I forgot, but I'll think of it in a second here. But yeah, I do. If I see someone playing something, I'll definitely try to jump in there with him. Or if people have requested, send a friend request to me, and I'll jump in them. I like multiplayer games with actual people, so it's always more fun that way.
Yeah. So I think, the reality of this topic is that as you've said, Zeus, right? We don't necessarily seem to be the gamers who, the hype cycle is pulling us into every new release, but we're also not the ones that are methodically going back through backlog or wringing every last ounce of gameplay out of something we have. So we really seem to be kind of straddling that line, which I think provides a nice perspective because we can talk about how we can, get more out of a gaming experience, but also kind of keep engaged in some of the new trends that are going on. So before we move on to playlists, which I think actually tie in with this topic really well, because a lot of what we're playing is either double dipping back into things or returning to similar gameplay experiences. I just want to see if Prime or Glacius have anything else left on this topic.
Yeah, I just remember what I was going to say now. So
memory.
memory. That's right. It jogged my head. So I was just thinking about it while you guys were talking, and I noticed when I start to think more about my backlog, it's usually at the beginning of the year. Like I don't know if it's like a New Year's resolution thing or just because the big wave of titles has finally kind of subsided, and it's you can kind of just see what you got, and it's just like, oh, all right, finally all right, I'm playing I don't know what's coming out this like Lost Legacy or something. And it's like, all right, I've gotten through that and don't really feel like playing something else right away new. So like, hey, I want to just jump back in and finish off Just Cause 3 or whatever. Just like I started to do at the beginning of the year, and that just kind of fell off because stuff started to come about. So I don't know if you guys see the same pattern. At least I know for me, that's how it seems to go when I really start thinking about my backlog and jumping back into it.
And I'm sorry, Prem, you said you were incentivized by what was it, time of year in the post holiday season?
Yeah, that's just what I noticed thinking back of when I started thinking about my backlog. Like seriously, it's like always near the beginning of the year, like those first 3 or 4 months. So that's just something I started thinking about just now.
Yeah, that's going to be tougher now with all these new hot games that are particularly first party titles that seem like they're going to be dropping right in that time frame, and it seems like the first-party publishers, the console manufacturers, are seeding the holiday season to the multi-platform big publisher guys, and then they're pushing their first-party stuff out in like the first third of the year.
Yeah, it's usually those first 2 quarters now because we got Red Dead in the spring. I think God of War is in the spring, maybe, or is that earlier? I can't remember.
Yeah, I'm not so much certain about next year, but I know this year was like the 2 weirdly titled PS4 games. Nuna, Naki.
Neo. It's Neo, excuse me. It's time for correcting you. Yes, it is Neo and then Nier, but we'll probably say Automata wrong.
Yes.
Or yes, right? I mean, but you had March where Horizon Zero Dawn and Zelda came out, right? There's but I agree with you, Prime. I think that for me, that's part of it is, kind of the post-holiday sales pile that, are deals too good to pass up. And also the checkbook balancing reality of, oh, I've spent enough on games. I probably should milk something out of what I have already. Definitely plays into that springtime.
So I'll make one renege that is significant. So it may balance out or negate my earlier response that was maybe lukewarm, is my 8-month Destiny run that began 2 years after that game's release began because of the drop of the DLC. Because I was like, now DLC's coming out that may flesh the game out, and I feel bad that I haven't even gotten to the point where it would warrant me picking up the DLC. And I didn't intend for that run to go that long or as far, but it did. So it caught me off guard, and that was a game that I just kind of steadily. I don't want to say scheduled it, but I definitely focused on playing it at a higher level of frequency than I might, any other game.
So speaking of which, so you came to Destiny 1 late, and you enjoyed kind of the refined version of it. You're coming to Destiny 2 relatively early. As you said, you picked it up last weekend on a digital sale. So does it feel as refined to you? Are you, I guess to start off, how far are you? What are your first thoughts? Are you still kind of composing those thoughts? Where are you at in your Destiny 2 experience if you enjoyed 8 months of Destiny 1?
Yeah, I'll definitely say it's it's not cookie cutter, right? They did go back and redesign and overhaul certain parts of the game. I don't know if all those things were good. So it's a different experience this time around because I bought it. Well, I bought it last time as a day one purchase, but I definitely. So that was 2014, right? So in the fall, and I had bought my Xbox One and PS4 like that February. So I guess I do not know what the heck is going on now, or why that's showing up there. And it's, sorry, I got another IM thing popping up here. I'm trying to clear it. So something's different. I think. So were we doing Band of Gamers when the first Destiny dropped?
That's a good question. So I don't think so. I think whatever the iteration of Band of Gamers that it was started up in the, and correct me if I'm wrong, Prime, but I think it started up in the early part of 2015. So maybe January, February, around 15, because I wasn't even part of CAG until that time. It was through a group of people that I met through Destiny 1 that brought me into CAG. So my guess would be we weren't talking about this at the launch of Vanilla Destiny.
Yeah,
Right,
2014 was the original Destiny, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Fall, September.
Yeah, September 9th. Yep. Sorry, I just picked it up.
So I bring that up because one of the things for us is, at least for me, is doing this show creates a certain degree of hyper focus on things like this, right? Other things that I might just casually invest time in, I may not usually be as detailed about or as focused. So for whatever reason, I'm more focused. I think, like, playing through that first Destiny game, and it may have also had to do with the age of my kids and how much sleep I was getting. I don't know, but it was very muddled. I don't know. So it's hard for me to say, is it because we're doing the podcast now, or is the story actually a little tighter this time around, or is it because I have the background of the data from the first one? But I don't feel as lost in this Destiny.
I'd say that all three of those are probably accurate.
Okay.
So go ahead and keep going with those assumptions. Yeah, there's definitely, there's actually a narrative through line, and that the refined systems are a lot more transparent. There's more available to the player to be able to discover that and not kind of have to stumble through farming materials and what that means. So yeah, there's a lot of, all three of those things. I can't speak for your sleep pattern, but I'm going to guess that your kids are older and that helps. So,
right. So there's a little more lore this time around, and a little more infrastructure and webbing behind it, right? That give you reference points for all this stuff to make a lot more sense. Whereas before I was like, what is this? And then all the stuff was on Bungie.net, which still, like, trying to calm down before I work through this. So the fact that you still get alerts to sign up for an account on Bungie.net, like, come on. Like, it was aggravating enough that all that stuff was on Bungie.net for the first game. I'm gonna have to say it again. I really didn't want to say it. I'm not gonna invest my time in content that you place outside of the game. Like, if you expect me to consume it and you want me to, just put it in the game. Like,
and so they did, though, in this one. It's there. It is in the lore tabs of your weapons and armor. All those things that used to be in a Grimoire card are now either you can walk around the environment and scan something with your ghost and get a little bit of a nugget. You can do the adventures and get some lost sectors and get some narrative going there. Or then when you get certain weapons, there's a whole separate tab that gives you, kind of your grimoire, gives you your codex aspect of a narrative story behind that weapon.
So what are the alerts for you to go to Bungie.net? Is that just extra, like, or is it just repeating the same thing that you can already see in the game?
So I am not sure what you're talking about, because I don't recall seeing a whole lot of alerts to go to Bungie.net, except maybe at the very beginning of the game in the login part.
Yeah. So there was definitely at least one or two that I remember. And I just remember just being extremely aggravated because right, wrong, or indifferent, or what it actually does, you know, FOMO is a thing in our society now, and that doesn't mean that it has to affect you, right? I guess that's a choice. So at any rate, that's the thing. It just made me feel like they were posting stuff that I was missing out on or not getting because I elected to not like sign up for that account or whatever.
Not that I've seen. No, I guess, I mean, and I have the Bungie, I have the Destiny app on my phone, and I haven't even really been inclined or prompted to go dig around at it. I've been getting enough content out of the game in terms of lore, but it feels different in terms of, there was a lot of lore around Destiny if you spent the time to dig at it.
Right.
Now there's I'm going to say there's probably a little bit less lore buried in there, but it's certainly a whole lot more accessible than it was before. And so the ease of use probably offsets the quantity. Okay.
So yeah, and that, I mean, at the end of the day, it particularly aggravated me, but but it's not that big a deal. So I don't know. What are your impressions of the game so far?
So gameplay wise, I'm really enjoying it. Right, I spent plenty of time with 3 different characters in the original Destiny. I'm liking the systems. I'm getting a better handle on them. Truthfully, within the first couple, maybe first 2 nights where I was playing an hour or 2 each night, I still wasn't. I was in the mindset that I was going to play through the story and get rid of it and wait for the PC version. And now, as I've played through a week and I'm level 20 and have unlocked all 3 of my subclasses, and now I feel like, yeah, I'm pretty invested in the world. I really am struggling with the story, and for a whole lot of fan fiction-y geek type of reasons. But I'm liking the systems. I've gotten used to the different gunplay. I've played Prime. I've played both kind of casual mode and also competitive mode in the Crucible. In terms of, the casual mode is where they kind of dull down the your power levels and your guns, so they're a little more balanced. And competitive mode actually factors in your power level and level factors in there, so it's more like what Iron Banner was. And I played some of that last night after hitting 20 and got demolished in my first game. And then in my second game, in the PvP, there's a lot more. It's you play together, or you can't go kind of lone wolf and just jump in and punch somebody. It's a lot more strategic, and so I'm enjoying that aspect of it.
Now, are there things? I got the impression from talking to or seeing the guy who's voiced by the African American actor on The Walking Dead.
Lance Reddick.
What's the name again?
Lance Reddick. Yes,
yeah. So I get the impression that there are things that are locked behind Crucible gameplay.
That's a good question. Not that I've seen, right? I mean, they give you some quests around the Crucible. There are some, you can get some powerful weapon drops around the Crucible. I don't know that there's anything that's locked behind it. It does not do what Destiny 1 did, where after you got to a certain point in the story, it forced you to go do some Crucible. It encourages you to do that, but I could keep going with the narrative if I didn't want to touch Crucible at all.
Wasn't there certain weapons in Destiny 1 that you could only get in the Crucible? Or I thought there was. I'm not for sure.
Yeah, there were definitely some exotics that could only be earned through X number of kills in the Crucible. And maybe there are the same here at the exotics level, but that doesn't gate you earlier in the game.
Okay. So yeah, that was the thing I saw, was something about weapons or whatever that was locked behind Crucible. So no, that's fine. So you and I talked a little bit in chat about the mechanics, right, and things that I didn't particularly care for. I've also noticed that it's a similar so mainly the main thing that I picked up on was that there is a more noticeable delay between doing a melee strike and then being able to fire again. Enough of a delay to where you're vulnerable, which is a little bothersome because you're vulnerable to the person you just punched. So somehow they recover from the punch faster than you recover from throwing it. I've also noticed that there's a more noticeable delay when sprinting and being able to shift to a firing position. And I may be wrong about the sprinting, but definitely when high jumping. So when you do a double jump, it takes a split second when you either with the left stick, or definitely with the left lower trigger to get into a firing position and fire down on somebody from above. How is that part of the combat mechanic?
Yeah, I guess I've noticed that too. Playing the last couple of nights, I've been doing a lot of public events, and trying that, jumping over something, coming around behind them, and trying to fire at them in the air. I wonder if there are some weapons or armor later on where there were in the first game where you could get a little more stability in the air with some of those things. I've already noticed that on the punching aspect, that as I've continued to level up classes, that certain specs will allow me to punch and get an overshield, so that I don't have to worry much about recovery, because I can punch, get a little bit of shield, and keep punching, or move into my gunplay. So as my character is leveled up, I definitely, it goes back into that power fantasy. So it's been effective in that way. But certainly in the early game, it does have that dynamic. I think that they've built in systems into either the skill trees or into the weapons to help support some of those base settings.
Is there anything added to the gameplay, like any new powers, or I want to say powers, but anything extra? Obviously, you can throw grenades and you can do the melee. Anything else that they've added, or just more refined it?
So I'm going to say refined, right? Like if you didn't like the classes of the original Destiny, you're still kind of stuck with them. There's not a whole lot new here, that instead of just being a bubble titan, you have a Captain America shield, right? We saw this from the betas, right? That instead of having the arc blade, you now have the arc, bow. Not bow, but bow like Donatello, right? That you've got a staff. So instead of having an instant res, you have a sword that shoots fire. But otherwise, it's still pretty much shooting, punching, grenades. Grenades in Crucible are not nearly as effective. Punching is not nearly as effective in PvP. I enjoyed PvP as kind of being a brute and running in, punching somebody Halo style. And now in this one, that punch has a different feel. It doesn't do the same amount of damage, but it's still pretty much the same game.
And that's unfortunate, right? Because I noticed over the weekend that you also play a Titan. I think you play a couple other different classes too, but to use an Overwatch term, I main a Titan, right? I briefly, I think over on Xbox,
it's the gorilla from Overwatch.
Yeah. So I think over on Xbox One, I had another, it was my multiplayer only, my co-op only character was like a hunter or something. But I feel like in Crucible, if you're a Titan, your punch should mean something more than a hunter's punch, or I don't even know. Is the other class a warlock?
Yeah, so a warlock, a hunter. Yeah, no, and you're not the only one to say that, right? This is where running a half marathon. You listen to a lot of podcasts as you train for a half marathon and run it, and so I was listening to the Destiny Community podcast, and they were talking about that as well. Like, if you're a Titan, your punch is supposed to be the most powerful weapon you have, and it doesn't feel like that.
Right. So
whether or not that's a PvP balancing piece, or if that's something that they spec back in at some point in time. But you're right. I think this is where I definitely feel like now, as my character has grown stronger, that my punches mean something in PvE. So as I'm doing public events and I'm getting yellow bars or even orange bar enemies, I have no hesitation of running up to them and punching them and going toe to toe with them with my melee now. But that's after X number of levels.
Yep. So Prime, you got a couple questions?
Yeah. So you're talking about the special abilities a little bit. So are all the old specials gone? Like the Warlock had like that orb thing that you can like throw down and it would explode or whatever, and stuff like that. So it's all totally new and all the old stuff's gone.
Nope, still there. You can still be
Oh, okay.
Emperor Palpatine. You can still throw your Nova bombs as a Warlock. You know, there's certain skills in each one that are no longer there, right? So the one skill in the Warlock that was gone is the self res. You know, the arc blade in the Hunter is gone, but you get the pole. And actually, for Titans, the bubble is still there, but it's like a secondary skill versus the Captain America shield. So if you were used to basically, you know, I ran a Titan with hammers a lot, and now I just the other day unlocked that class, and it basically feels like I'm going back and, you know, I've picked my character back up from where they were before. So it's very comfortable, which is probably not a bad thing.
To me, the thing that's significant is but at the end of the day, it's all nonsense, right? In terms of it's just gobbledygook. So the slate is wiped, right? You completely start over with a zeroed out skill tree. You at the beginning of the game, it's neat that I don't know. It's a little neat that you have at least the double jump, and you have at least one super skill that you can pull off when you get supercharged, and you immediately gain access to some halfway decent weapons. But that's it. So you have kind of two basic skills beyond just shooting and punching, and you know, and it feels very. And this is before all your powers are stripped. So what's bothersome about that is that you're supposed to do this roller coaster, right? You're supposed to come into the game and feel. I think you're supposed to feel like you're at your ending power level of Destiny, but you're not. And then you do this big, huge dump into a valley of when all your stuff is stripped. But it's a very brief period of time. Like, I don't even feel I didn't want that time to go on any longer, but I feel like the shortness of it didn't really make it effective from a storytelling perspective. And then you get to a point and you're back up the roller coaster. But what's weird is that second crest in the roller coaster, I felt far more powerful than I did at the beginning of the game, where theoretically I was at the hero level that I was at the end of my Destiny adventure. So it's very janky and disjointed in what they try and pull off in that. I get it. I understand it. There was a big hoorah moment when you get your power back and things kind of return to normal, and you're getting engrams and you have a town with a cryptarch, and there's a point where it feels like you're playing Call of Duty, and then all of a sudden you're back up to being a guardian, right? And that was effective. Like when it happened, because I thought it was going to go on longer, and I was like, this is really going to piss me off if I have another hour of this. But I didn't feel it was effective the way they did it. It felt like the what I'll call the anemic time was a big waste of time. There's a point where it gets very, very, very Borderlands-like. It felt like a straight rip from Borderlands.
I mean, the dogs, the skags are coming at you?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Yep.
No, so I'm going to say, yeah. This is where my problems with the game is not in the gunplay, because I could sit and just enjoy that, but it's in the world that they've, you know. So I agree with you, Prime, right? Zeus, that I'm playing on PS4, and my characters, all three of my characters who were in the high 300s on Xbox, if I would have come in with those, you know, that face or those characters, I would have wanted to have all my skill tree unlocked, right? Like, you should have come in the beginning of that game with, you know, in the Metroid way, like, here's all your powers, rather than just one tree. You know, I think that it is effective. It teases you enough if you are a new player to Destiny to get a sense like, oh, this is what I could be doing. This will be good. But if you came in with years of investment, it doesn't feel like it's your character at all, because you're not that powerful Titan. Right. And then I think, truthfully, I'm in the camp where I wanted the Lightless Guardian part to go on longer. You know, I didn't necessarily want the stumbling third person you know, action to go on or you know, walking narrative to go on any longer, but I wanted to be vulnerable longer. And actually, that's part of my own reason why I stuck around on Earth and unlocked my other classes, because I wanted that full set of powers rather than, oh, I touched this thing and within the first, you know, hour and a half of the game, I'm back to super powerful. You know, narratively, it works fine because it gives you a big bad guy and tells you he hurt you and kicked you out, and now you have to go hunt him down on a very basic level. But on the kind of grand space opera level, there's not a whole lot that it does in terms of story wise that I'm seeing so far.
Yeah, and just because I was winding myself around in a unfortunately very lengthy fashion, which is probably my norm, but well, I was to wind back around to Prime's question, right? The thing that makes all of it nonsense when you were asking about the skill tree is the design of the. So there's two key things to me in terms of UI design. The skill tree redesign just makes no sense to me. It's this weird, like circular traversal path spiral for like no reason. So instead of just presenting you a natural hierarchical stratification of your skills where you start at a core skill and then you just select and enable like the things underneath it, like it starts in the center and then it like goes, it spirals out, and it makes every time I go into that thing I have a difficult time understanding which of these things am I supposed to select. It took me a while to figure out it was like the white flashing ring around the thing, and I'm like, where is this going and why does it look like this? Perhaps
the design of it is really Dragon Age 2 is what it looks like to me.
Okay.
Like, it has that same triangle piece. It's certainly, I feel like it's better than the first game because you don't just have these circles that, you know, are just all lined up, but just Diablo it and make it that, you know, make it that skill tree that you're actually talking about.
Right. And then the second thing is maybe even more bothersome is the navigation. Like, you, in some cases, you like when you go into the shuttle, but you're going to a mission on Earth, you get the orbital view like in the original Destiny, but then you have to go into this additional like sub map that shows you where exactly on Earth you want to go. And I'm like, why do I need to do that? Why can't you just like have the planets with so I don't know. And I think there's two different ways to get into that view as well. But
at least in that view, I agree, right? Like you have to jump from one to the other, but then you don't have to go back to space. At least, you know, you kind of, there is that benefit, the loading screen benefit, but it's still layers upon layers. Yeah, no, I there's, you know, if there were things that annoyed you about the original Destiny, they're still in this DNA at some point. Yeah.
In some cases, they're worse because I was absolutely certain. I thought that in the marketing speak, they said that load times would be better, and they are not. You have more powerful hardware. You have all the lessons learned from 3 years of development on Destiny. How is it possible that the load times are still as excruciatingly long as they were before?
So there's load times and frame rate issues that people have been experiencing on PlayStation.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And so I don't get it.
You have it on PlayStation 2, I guess, Cleese?
Yeah, I have it on PS4.
Okay.
I will probably, this will probably be one of those titles where I make the investment to buy it on PC. And actually, I'm very interested to see. So my primary gaming desktop that runs off of an SSD. So I'll be interested to see how that plays. On my backup gaming PC that I'm on tonight, that uses it's a big honking 4 terabyte drive, but it's a 7,200 RPM drive. So I'm very interested to see if load times are significantly better on the PC. Game looks great. I will give it that. Game looks gorgeous. It is definitely an upgrade from the original graphics set. But yeah, like DBQ said, right, there's I feel like the story's tighter. The mechanics are nuanced. There are some refinements in it. I particularly don't like the refinements, but I can understand the ethos that drove them to make those better in some ways and more significant in real-time combat. But But a lot of the infrastructure stuff, like I don't like the load times, the UI design, are not better.
Yeah, I think we should come back to this because we're pushing our hour mark. But I think there's more to, as we continue playing this, I think we'll probably end up with more to say. You know, I may have invested some time in it so far, but I'm not as sold on it as an experience as I was back on the original Destiny. So we'll keep coming back to it. The Glessies, you and I have talked enough here, so I'm going to kick it over to Prime to kind of run through some of his things in his playlist before we wrap up the evening.
All right. So yeah. So playing Xbox One again. I think I mentioned that last week. Continue on Rocket League. I'm going through that. Hopefully soon. They haven't had a release date yet though for the Switch version yet, but they just keep saying holiday 2017. So hopefully it doesn't get pushed out. But there's that, and then I'm playing more Ark Survival Evolved. I was playing this past weekend, and I kind of thought about this the previous weekend and during the week, but I was like, man, I'm gathering all these different materials and stuff. I was like, man, I'm really, flying through this game where I'm leveling up really quick and I'm able to build. I built up like 2 houses already, so I was like, that's really weird. Then I noticed that they actually had for the past 2 weeks, they had I think it was like called Evolution Week or something like that. But basically, they up the rate that you basically accrue things. So that's why I was going. I thought I just got good or something, but I was evidently that wasn't the case. So I had a little help from the servers, from the company, the developers. So that was cool, and I think that ended Monday, I believe. So I'll have to trudge along and go back to my weary ways there. But I'm still having a lot of fun with that, so I'll continue that. Like I said, I was able to do 2 bases, so at least I have that, and I can kind of continue, fortify. I got to fortify that because you have to build up walls and stuff. Otherwise, all the dinosaurs. And I'm playing P versus E, which is just the people versus the environment. So I don't have to worry about people not directly attacking my base, but they can still like lure a dinosaur into my base and have it attack it. So so far it seems like this is a pretty decent server. So I had a little bit of problems with that, and the last time I played when I was doing the game preview playthrough. So hopefully it's a little bit better. And I don't know if they put any kind of like checks or not in the game now to kind of frown upon that, but I'll have to find out as I'm playing. And then of course playing Switch. I've been playing a lot of Lego City Undercover. Actually, I'm having a lot of fun with that game, and that's a lot. 3-4 year old game when it came out on the Wii U. More than that.
It was Wii U 2012.
Oh, really? Okay.
13 probably. I think it was early in the Wii U's life cycle.
Okay, so yeah, it's basically Grand Theft Auto, but in the Lego world, and you play as the police or as a cop actually instead of the crooks. So it's just a lot of little neat features that they have around the game that I guess I can kind of see in future Lego games that came after that. So it's actually pretty cool though. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm playing Project Octopath Traveler demo.
Yeah, so tell us more about that, because that was one that came out right on the release of the Nintendo Direct.
Yep.
And Square is sending out, or will be sending out, some follow-up surveys to people about it. So does it feel like a full concept, or does it feel like bits and pieces and they're trying to explore what works?
So yeah, you have 2 characters that you can choose from. There's 8 in total, and I don't know. It feels, so far I've played maybe an hour, 45 minutes to an hour or so. But I mean, it seems like a full-fledged game, I suppose. I just read a article recently that the Nintendo's UK site, they had like a news article that they were just talking about the game, and I guess they said that it's coming out in spring of next year, which I thought was kind of late. Not late, but kind of like a long time between the demo and the actual game release. So I thought that was kind of weird. So I don't know if that site was right or not. I mean, it was an official UK or a Nintendo site. So
I feel like more than any of the consoles that are out right now. And I don't mind it. I don't feel there's a tiny amount of content on the Switch, but I will say I feel like Nintendo is very deliberate and methodical in the pace at which they're rolling things out. So they have a lot of great games coming out in this holiday season, and as we turn the corner into the new year, so that doesn't surprise me as much, given what it feels like is this pacing methodology that they're using.
Yeah, I guess I'm not used to it because of you know, when you have demos with other games and on like Xbox at least, I don't know about the PS4, but usually it comes within like a month, maybe 2 at the most. So I
Yeah,
thought
on
kind of weird.
the IGN voice chat, Nintendo voice chat podcast, they were talking about how Square in Japan did this with the first Bravely Default, where they put out a demo a number of months, significant number of months beforehand, and then sent out a survey to help refine some of their systems. So
Okay, so the precedent then.
yeah, so there's precedent here on some of these kind of niche experimental releases.
Yeah, so I did get the email for the survey already, but that was like 2 days after it released. I think 2 or 3 days. I was like, I hadn't even played it then at that point, so I'm kind of holding off on that for now. So I want to play a little bit more. And no, but I'm enjoying the game. It's turn-based battle. You know, you pick what you want to do, attack or defend, or you can even run away depending on what the fight is. So I'm having fun with it. I started to get into those games a little bit on the 360, but I kind of fell off on it. So kind of getting used to it, and it's at least for me, it's a hard game just because I'm not used to that kind of play style, and you actually have to strategize. And so far, there's only one person on my party, so I don't know. I'm assuming I'll get more eventually, but I'm going against like I think the most I've gone against is like 3 people, and there's like a mid boss that I had to fight, and he like totally trashed me. So just because I wasn't ready for it, so I got to go back and get some supplies. But yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it right now, and that is a working title right now. So which it actually does say on the demo on the game itself. So I don't know. You didn't get a chance to play it, DB or Zeus?
No, I'm demoed out for 2017. I got to do a better. That's better. That's the thing. I need to do a better job of pacing next year.
That's your resolution for next year.
Yeah.
So I tried to get the demo, right? So I looked for it, right? The Nintendo eShop it was hard to find. I
Really?
probably spelled the game wrong. I put in Octo Space Traveler, and it came up with 0 results. It wasn't in the coming soon list. It wasn't in the new release list. The only thing I didn't do is to look at the entire game list that was out there, which I'm guessing it was there, but I was not in town when the direct happened, so I came back after a couple of days to look for it, and I really, granted, I only looked for 5 minutes and went back to playing Destiny, but I was looking for it because I'm curious, but it would be nice if it was if there was some way to highlight things, on that eShop.
Yeah, so it's got the Apple App Store search engine.
Yeah.
That's weird because I watched the direct that night because I didn't get to watch it during the day, and that's when I found out the demo was there, and I actually found it under the new release section. So it was kind of weird that same night. So unless they were just shuffling things around, or who knows.
Yeah, maybe I missed it. Maybe it was late and I wasn't looking for the name or something. But yeah. So anything else? We are at our hour mark. Glacius, you have any other final games you want to talk about before we head out, or plugs?
No, not necessarily. Like I said, I've just been playing a little Star Wars Battlefront on the PC that went well, and then played some Riptide GP Legends on the NVIDIA Shield Portable.
Was that part of your randomizer in terms of picking up different consoles at different times?
That was, although we talked a little bit about gaming strategies and backlog strategies for 2018, and I think you, Swiss, and I all talked about how we thought we might focus a little more on newer games. I've already made a slight adjustment in that direction, but I think the only other thing is next year I do want to maybe, there's something about what the Overwatch crowd is enjoying, right? How many of them have just thrown into that as an ecosystem. I might do that with Destiny. There's something to be said about going all in and joining a particular team, right, in terms of a game. And I have definitely eschewed that and skewed away from anything that looks, feels, smells, walks like a Morpig, or that level of commitment to any single title. But Destiny 2 might be something that I just solidly stick with consistently for all of next year, just to try and move that experience that I had later with Destiny back to the left.
Well, this will be a good follow-up to see if your concerns and kind of frustrations design-wise with Destiny 2 continue as you've got the motivation to kind of stick with it, but I'll be curious to see if if the gameplay clicks with you enough to keep that going.
Well, as we ended the Destiny 2 conversation, like I want to shape that up a little bit, right? It's still as good as Destiny was, which means it's still a good game, right? It's just we're taking swings at a game that is that has a very solid foundation, right? So we're taking an 80-85% B plus game and giving it knocks, but at the end of the day, it's still a B plus game, right? So take that as you will. Oh, by the way, just to support you in a fact check, Lego City Undercover's initial release was 2013.
Okay. Prime, any final thoughts?
Nope, I think that's it for now. Maybe you guys, or even I can be in it too. We can have a Destiny podcast at some point, and we can all talk about it. I don't know if I'm still gonna. I might get it maybe eventually, like on a sale or something, but we'll see.
Yeah, I would guess by the time the holidays roll around, you could probably find it for $50.
Have they talked about DLC at all?
Yes, there's a DLC pack coming in December and then in early spring. The December pack is going to be focused around Osiris, who was, the trials of Osiris on Mercury. There's going to be a couple of new maps and a new patrol area on Mercury. And then the March one looks to be the symbolism on it, not to geek out, but the symbol is dealing with some of the Warmind stuff. So it could be back on Earth. It could be a return to some zones that we've seen before or new zones. But not a lot of detail on that second one. But yes, they've planned for that, and they're selling expansion passes like anything else. So gentlemen, I think this conversation about what keeps us going in those games that we have in our backlog or the games that we have on our new shelf, is a great topic for the Enough to Keep Going podcast, and I'm sure it's going to keep us talking into the fall. So until next week, I'm not going to be running a 14.1 marathon. But this is Enough to Keep Going, and I hope we are always enough to keep you going and gaming and enjoying. Have a good night.